Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? This is Laura Hickey. The room is muted, if so. I can't hear you. Oh, there it is. Now you're unmuted. Thanks for letting us be here tonight. I was curious if you could also promote my colleague, Melissa Beatty, to be able to unmute here.
Laura, she should be also able to talk when we get to THK on the agenda.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You. All right. You good?
Okay, I'm calling to order the June 16th, 2025 BOSAC meeting. So we'll do a roll call.
Howard here. Chris Joyce. Nikki LaRochelle. Chris Tennell. Bobby Vanka. Jay Beckerman. David Rossi is unable to attend in person, but he will be watching virtually.
Great. Approval of the April 28th meeting minutes. And just as a note, I've historically been sometimes making a motion to approve, but I learned from Keely I'm not supposed to do that as chair. So I'll just wait till someone else chimes in to do that.
That person says motion to approve. I
Move to
I move
approve.
to approve.
I just as the chair should not be that
Okay,
person.
I move to approve. And
Sorry, I learned that so late in my career.
never too
So
late.
first thing, okay, a discussion or approval of anything with our agenda.
No,
Okay. Non-agenda public comment. Anyone have anything?
Muted.
I don't think so. Looks like he's still muted.
Yeah, but I allowed him to talk.
Okay. He can talk. He can unmute if you want.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay. All right, so we'll go staff summary.
Okay, couple updates, and I'm happy to take questions or comments on any of the items, but sorry. How about now? Oh, okay. Just on some of the field work that's being done, the Lorium parking lot relocation and road realignment project. That is gonna get started in August and will take 3 to 4 weeks. One potential conflict is the Breck Epic that goes through there on August 15th. They'll make sure there's arrangements to allow the race to go through there. But this project will require public closure of the trailhead and the road corner. That saves a lot of money and efficiency just in terms of the project and not having to do traffic control or move stuff out of the way.
announced to the public, like, or put on the apps or
Yeah.
websites and things.
Yes, and we still have that QR code that links to a project page. And we'll be updating that once we get the final plans and the timeline. We'll update that project page and also message it out on social media and our website.
Been the Summit Daily.
And we'll put a blurb in the Summit Daily. Great. Okay, and then another one was the restoration work for the B&B area in Australia Gulch that Excel impacted. We had a site visit with them. That we're trying to start at July 7th. We had the option of maybe doing it in the fall, but we tried that last time and it didn't happen and we don't want to risk it. It won't require any trail closures. They think it'll take Same thing, 3 to 4 weeks. It'll take some time on the front end staging materials and on the back end removing materials. Those will be staged on the Country Boy property. But they feel confident that their revegetation work will be effective doing it in July, and we want them to get started and get that done. So that's the time update on that. Anything else you guys want to talk about in the staff summary?
On the
Bobby?
Rami, whatever, however, which of the trails that we manage that our system is? included?
Yeah, top of my head would be Peaks Trailhead and the Boreas Pass Winter Trailhead, Wakefield. I'm sure there are others. It's the ones, Burrow. It's the ones that are kind of within our town proximity or Upper Blue Basin that access Forest Service property that aren't included in the Camp Hale project.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Fun update. The Camp Hale project has a new acronym. It's called STRAP, Southern 10-Mile Recreation Access Plan.
Oh, much more.
The old one.
Strapped.
Duke, on the Spruce Creek, maybe this is a Catherine question, but I know it looks where the construction is, it looks almost inaccessible, but it says the parking or the trailhead parking still open. So does that mean it's like one lane? I was just curious what that situation looked like.
So Nikki, it's not accessible from the Spruce Creek Road intersection with Highway 9.
Okay.
It is accessible via Crown Drive through Blue River, and it's also accessible via Warriors Mark and Gold King Way. Town of Blue River isn't thrilled about having the road detour through Crown Drive, but it is access to the trailhead.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you. We good? Okay. Then we are on to our discussion.
one question?
Yes, please.
With the wildfire ready watersheds, I don't know if this is even an appropriate question for here, but where does that, if the town contributes something like that, maybe this is a question for you, Jay, but where does that come from? Like what kind of pot of money does that kind of?
This
work
one came from Public Works.
Okay,
As far as historically something like that, I don't, maybe Mark and Jay could chime in, but that's where this money came from.
okay.
I think it's come from different pots over time.
Mhm.
Definitely, open space. We've contributed to some of these in the past.
Yeah.
So, Public Works is the other main one.
Okay, yeah.
Ever advertised? Because I didn't have it on my calendar, and those are the kind of things that I tend to go to.
They sent a postcard mailing they tried to send it to everybody in the county. And so if you didn't get one, they'll be happy to hear, well, they'll want to hear that feedback.
Well, could have been my husband picked it up that day.
As an example, I did get it because they had asked at a previous stakeholder meeting, we're going to be sending this out. Please let you know if you don't receive it. And I had received it, but apparently not everybody did.
Okay.
Sorry, no.
No, we're good. All right, we'll do McCain Open Space Design.
Great. Yeah, happy to introduce Sam Spicer and Craig Kern from THK, and CDR Associates is working with them on the public engagement piece, and Laura Hickey and Melissa Beatty are joining virtually. And they'll talk to you about their history and the project so far, and it is in the packet, but excuse me, we'll be able to meet with this group 3 times over the course of the project, which will extend through December of 2025. So this is preliminary introduction, and then come back with proposed concepts sometime in the middle of that time span, and then come back with the final draft.
So this is the first.
This is the first of 3, and they'll also be meeting with council 3 times and the planning commission once.
All right. Well, thank you can you hear me well enough with or without the microphone?
We
Okay.
use the microphone for our
Okay.
virtual folks.
Get it a
so
little closer.
they won't be able to hear you if you don't talk into it. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask. Now I can hear myself. All right. I wanted to start, well, I'm Craig Karn. I'm Director of Design with THK. And Sam Spicer here is one of our project managers. And if you haven't learned it already, and you will, that he's a great communicator and far more organized than myself as well. So that's why that's why he's doing that. But I'd like to start by, I've read your open space trails and master plan now for probably the second or third time. And there's some key parts of it that I want to go back and just touch on real quickly that I think are very important to us. I think it was part of our project approach that we put in our proposal. So I just want to kind of go back through those real quickly and just speak to them because you all, I think I noticed that most, if not all of you were involved in the development of this plan as well. I can't say for sure that everyone on the current commission is, but here tonight. But I think that's really great. And I think some of your input even tonight is going to be very important to us because we're really in the information gathering and site analysis stage. You've seen some of our information. We'll talk about it and really get your input to nothing like a good start that leads to a good finish on an exercise like this. So your input in particular, because we're really bridging from this great overall master plan to a very kind of specific design exercise ultimately. And we want to get it right. And we want to see that we've looked at every opportunity to create the best outcome we can. The decision-making framework very early on, I think is really great, in terms of starting at the very top, habitat sensitivity. Our group at ERO, in fact, I think have been out on the site today doing some of that initial work for us. So that'll be rolled into, additional graphics as a part of our site analysis, some of which you've seen and we'll ask you about in a draft form. One of the things that was very important to us actually in writing our proposal, and I think is a great opportunity with this particular project, is your 4 strategic goals. And we really made that a real emphasis of how we thought we should approach this work. Conservation, of course, that's the first step, the opportunities to address conservation in its broader sense. And then in the detail opportunities on this site, that's a great way to start everything. I've been a community designer and planner for 40 plus years now. And that approach to everything we do, even in urban development and the like, is refreshing to me and keeps me excited about doing this kind of work. The focus on recreation, I think as I'm going to quiz you a little bit about this front country opportunity and what that means to you. Access and inclusion, this site is a real opportunity to really tackle that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And of course, stewardship. If you don't have follow through, none of this really means a lot. This will be a long-term process. I'm sure our design approach and design solution when we get there will be several years in implementation. It takes a long time for nature to reestablish itself and just to see how things work with the community. It's a ever evolving process, really. But I think that's really, really great about that, especially the issue about access and inclusion and how we can make open space accessible to people of all different life stages and physical abilities and the like. And I think this site presents a great opportunity to really tackle that. So I think that's pretty cool. Your conservation guidelines are really great as well, right? The very prototypical ones about conservation values and protecting our wetlands and all that. In this case, the surrounding land uses now and some future uses that will come along adjacent to this space are really important to address and how they interface with it. Again, recreation values, there's a lot of opportunities here to talk about what's appropriate for this place as opposed to, other improvements they're already making in terms of typical park and recreation facilities. Something that's always important to me, and I think as great as the last one, is cultural values. How can and should we address the historic resources, the history of this site? It's certainly gone through a lot of change in the last century or so that we all know about. In fact, when I first moved to Colorado in 1983, I'm originally from Michigan. I can remember working on this site when it was very much in the before mode as if I'm remembering correctly, the old airport and lots of tailing piles from mining. So there's been a lot of change from that. And there's some history to the site before that we may want to tell a story about on the site as well. But culture's that third leg of the three-legged stool of great community development. If you don't build that into the plan, you've missed an opportunity. And so we'll talk about that in a lot more detail. Management zones, again, I think this is really cool, and this is where, this site is identified as a front country site. So after we go through a little bit of our information, I really want to hear much from you. What's that mean to you? And what are the opportunities for that versus mid-country areas and of course, backcountry conditions? What does that in particular mean to you all? And what do you think is, are important things to you as a part of that? There's this great kind of matrix in the back we don't need to talk about, but it speaks to that as well. And then design guidelines. One that probably the last one down that page that's really important is the opportunity to consolidate and cluster trail density. This is probably a good site where we can have a lot of different types of trails that provide accessibility for a lot of different people and different kinds of uses. Again, I think it's really important to address all the, given opportunities for everybody in all the different life stages that they are in your community, from our littlest kids to our oldest and longest citizens, and we're trying to provide for all. So I won't speak a whole lot more to a lot of that, but again, I hope by the time we're done, I'm maybe close to as intimately aware of what this plan means to you as you do, because I'll read it another dozen times or so, I'm sure, as we move through the process. And so it's a great document. So with that, I know we sent some information, some of our progress you've had a chance to see, mostly precedent images. And this first, I guess you all can see it on your laptops or up above, so I don't have to make sure you're seeing it all. Again, this speaks to the history and culture of the site and your community. We just grabbed some of these historic images. I think it looked like some of them were probably from some of your website and other local sources, but wanted to just include these. These are not that we have any preferences, especially at this early stage, kind of in the analysis and just information gathering. But I think some of these tell the story of, what mining has been about on the site and in the community. So those are important. There may be other elements of history of the town that we want to make sure and address. And if there are things like that are important, I'd love to hear about them from you now or in subsequent meetings as we move further along. Interpretation can be really important on a site like this, because we can bring information to people that normally maybe can't get out into backcountry conditions, and kind of share with them and give them opportunities to be exposed to what that may mean to them when they can't really go out and, do a 10-mile hike into the backcountry, those kind of things. So I think that can be important as well. Let me go to the next. Sam and some of our other staff have gathered these are just examples of all the different kind of things we can do in terms of interpretation and telling the story of the site and the community. Especially in a front country condition like this, where it's accessible for people to see it. All different kinds of designs of signage, information that we can share. Again, going back to the, inclusiveness, is some of these examples that are tactile, so that people that maybe don't have the greatest eyesight, they can still, experience that. The one in the middle is actually, I'm trying to remember where that was from, but a three-dimensional map, and it also has Braille information, so you can even learn by touch about, the site and history of it. A lot of different things we can do. All different types of trail signage. That'll be really important. In fact, Kevin Shanks, who's our principal and director of planning and landscape architecture, is one of the last things he told us today, is that, how we handle signage that's cohesive and effective, without overwhelming the site. There's nothing worse than, putting a bunch of signs up and corrupting it, but how do you strike that balancing act? We'd look to your experience. You've done a lot of other trails and doing a lot of other improvements now. What works for you now? In the future, do you have a template per se, or, certain protocols you have? We're going to want to learn more about that as we go through the project and integrate all that into it as well. So I'll go through all these, and then we can come back. And if you all have any questions or comments or insights about any of them. Important part of course, is landscape, right? You've done the great, the river improvements out there to reconstruct and reestablish the river in a much more natural pattern. I think one of the great opportunities here will be able to not only use the native landscape, but demonstrate how it can be, effective in terms of redevelopment, other parts of the community, any other property owners, they can learn a lot about that. I think landscape will be a big part of the solution out there, and trying to bring more, again, more diversity, more environmental diversity. Biodiversity is important. We're going to look at what kind of plant materials can perform well in these kind of disturbed soil conditions. And I know you have a lot of experience in that in a lot of other areas. that'll be important as well. We may also find that there may be some other, you know, I only had Sam put the common lilac picture in the middle of that because I know in a lot of Colorado, that actually represents kind of a historic step. That's what settlers brought with them from the east. And then one of my favorites happened to be in Central City, the Teller Rose. This covers the landscape up there. So you may know plant materials and things that are kind of part of that cultural history of your community that settlers brought with them. And those are great to be able to build into the landscape design. I think these are more just initial images of what we see as maybe being patterns and opportunities of development in the landscape out there on the McCain site. One of the things that I think is probably most important to me out there after been out on the site a couple of weeks ago and stood out there and enjoyed the great panoramic views. We don't want to make that go away in an effort to see how many things we can put into the space. Open space is about making sure the space is still there when we're done with improving it and things like that. I think that'll be a great opportunity out there to keep those wide open vistas. As your community continues to grow, space tends to turn into mass with new improvements, new buildings, ongoing urbanization and development. This is a great opportunity to make sure and preserve that broad sense of space because there's just great views all up and down the valley into the ski area that they'll be an important part of the development. Techniques for how we can improve the condition out there and really enhance the landscape and see it be, healthier and more diverse and more of a natural system-based landscape. We'll have to look into how we can better reestablish the landscape out there because there's some challenging soil conditions. It's really just the leftovers of a century of mining and regrading and all of that. There's some things that were done as a part of the river reconstruction that we've already learned about from what they did, and we'll be doing more of that. We have to try to keep the water we have on the site up where the plants can benefit from it because, this whole drainage way, the cobblestone, it has always gone down probably 50 feet down. So we have to find ways, which they did with the river, to keep the water up where we can see it. Because as I'm sure many of you can remember, there were times when you didn't see the river through much of Breckenridge. It was running along. It was just down below all the tailing piles and everything. So we'll look there's techniques that we hope to learn more about and do out there to emulate that natural condition and put some of that back. Rainwater capture is a big one. I think there's opportunities. We want to do all the sources of water, rainfall, and even water off the roadway that's built out there. They're all opportunities that we want to integrate into the design. These are really just about trail hierarchy or form examples of how we can manage trails. To me, as a landscape architect, it's become more important than ever that we try to have solutions that don't involve introducing any more impervious surfaces into any development we do, whether it's very urban development or a space like that, that we're working on. There'll be places where we'll need that, but we want to make sure that we use that judiciously to provide access to certain user groups, but really keep it down to natural systems. There's a couple of favorite images, just not because I took them, but I think they're good examples. In the upper right-hand corner, that's along the dunes where I grew up as a kid in Western Michigan, where they restored an old sand mining site, which was nothing but open moving sand because all the vegetation had been lost. And so the sand dunes were constantly moving, burying adjacent roadways to the east of the properties. As long as I can remember as a kid, they were always trying to dig Lake Shore Drive out of the dune. But that became a park. An important part of preserving that sensitive nature condition was they did a lot of elevated boardwalks so we wouldn't get a lot of social trails because that dune environment's very sensitive to foot traffic. So there may be areas of our site where we're going to want to do that. On the lower right-hand side, that's actually from up in the Orkney Islands of northern Scotland, where they've used a pervious surfacing where if the traffic is less, nature just grows in. If traffic is more, it can handle it, but it's not an impervious surface. But we'll be looking at all those different trail opportunities because, again, I think as this front country condition, we want to look at how many different ways can we provide access to as many people as possible. Do we have any more of those images or is that it? Okay, well, this is really just our kind of initial base map of the site, what we know about its immediate context, some of the development that's happened place now already, some of the, you know, the Vista Verde residential that's out there, your solar fields, and a lot of uses are going on now. I understand, or I'm not real clear about whether you envision the school site still happening there, but there's probably other development opportunities that will happen there, and I'd love to hear about if you all have any thoughts about that, and how we might, you know, make sure and integrate that into the design as we move forward. We're also in the process of creating a larger context map because we haven't done that yet, but I think that'll be important to look at the larger context of where the site sits within your community and, you know, accessibility issues and things. And other, you know, one of the things we'll look at, and it'll certainly come up as we, you know, get into neighborhood engagement, is it's pretty typical on sites like this where the new residents will go, well, gosh, that'd be a great space for a ball field. Right? It's big and flat. Why don't we put soccer fields? Everybody wants soccer. But I know you have plenty of those planned, not very much further down the road from here. And so we want to have that greater context so we can remind people that you are working on providing those kind of facilities and really be focused on what's appropriate for this site. This is some of our initial mapping. This is going to drive us a lot because this is mapping of the river improvements that have been done out there, understanding the 100-year floodplain that affects a lot of the site. We're gonna do more homework to understand, you know, what this map means to us. Because I look at some of this as a landscape architect who's worked on a lot of these things, and just to understand how some of this works and some of this mapping, we may need to revisit some of this through the design process. But that will be really important because primarily this is a waterway corridor, and we have to really have a good understanding of how that's working now, how we can take advantage of that water to possibly improve other parts of the site. And again, other things we'll look at is even how can we take advantage of water that's running down McCain Road in the gutter, and rather than sending it down to a detention pond, how can we use that water and divert it into the site to, you know, begin to reestablish, you know, landscape along at least the perimeters of the site and things like that. There's a real opportunity there. Views, we'll probably add more to this, and this is where we'd love your input as well. But again, the thing I noticed immediately about going out there, especially if you look at the center of the site, there's probably not a lot of other places in town where you have the extent of views, not only to the ski area and the you know, the immediate range, mountain range there, but all the way up the valley to the north and to the south, spectacular views. I think we're going to look for ways to make sure we preserve that. And there are places that when this site is developed that you can go and enjoy those views forever, because again, you get into more urban parts of town and downtown, you really don't have those big expansive views. And we want to make sure and hold on to them. And these are some great pictures that we took out there on the site not too many weeks ago. In fact, it's a lot greener today already. It was exciting to see that. Spring is arriving. Again, we'll go through a couple more of these, and then I just want to know if you all have any initial input on any of the stuff that we've shown you.
And then before we do that, I know that Laura and Melissa would like to just give
Yes.
you a really brief overview of their engagement approach. So once we get to the next slide, the following 3 slides will be from them. So we'll let them talk a little bit first, but then we'll be ready to take any questions. These views correlate to the map. I know it's a little bit hard to tell when you don't have them right next to each other, but they are in the order that they appear. And really we did that to maximize how much of the view you could see. You know, we thought about trying to put it on the map, but we wanted to provide a little bit of better context. Pretty much any direction you look on the site is an extremely amazing view. And we want to make sure to preserve that and keep that as much as possible, and even emphasize that and make them better in certain places when we can. So we would love to hear about any ideas to doing that as well. But I will hand it over to Laura and Melissa to go through the next 3 slides really quick, and then we'll be ready for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. I included photos of ourselves in case we couldn't come off camera here. I think you all can see us here, but hi, I'm Laura Hickey with CDR Associates, here with my colleague, Melissa Beatty. We are working on the engagement on the THK and ERO team to engage the broad community and the decision makers and everybody around the vision and feedback for the McCain open space parcel. So Duke already kind of highlighted some of our engagement activities, and you should have received the draft engagement plan in your pre-meeting packet. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time, Sam, if you want to go to the next slide. I just wanted to go over an overview of our engagement. Our approach really starts with information, education, and beginning a two-way conversation about the context of the site, kind of what Craig alluded to before. And you can see that we're looking to do broad engagement with the town of Breckenridge and residents, work more closely with those neighboring residents to the north, south, and west, really being mindful to engage and include Spanish-speaking residents who may not be as familiar with planning processes. We'll also engage those neighboring land managers, the Forest Service and wildlife managers, CPW, as well as people we expect to want to use the site. So those conservation, community, and recreation interest groups. And then I've highlighted you all here on this, this spectrum of engagement that we use at the collaborate level. So really want to highlight the partnership we see with you all throughout this process to help us understand that site context, that vision, and uphold those four components of your open space plan, as Craig mentioned in the beginning of his presentation. And ultimately, we'll go to town council and we'll touch base with them along the way to approve the open space plan. That all fits together, if you want to go to the next slide, Sam, in alignment with the kind of technical phases of the project. So we are in phase 1 currently. You can see yourselves as the first meeting listed there for our engagement. We'll touch base with town council kind of in tandem with the times we touch base with you all. And once we have a draft plan, we'll present to the planning commission as well in phase 3. But phase 1 here, we're looking for context, input, vision, desires for the space to inform those conceptual designs. Phase 2 will look to get feedback on those designs. And then phase 3 will look for those kind of final touches, the final stamp of approval, the any kind of last thoughts are addressed and concerned. Broadly speaking, we'll be keeping the public engaged through kind of email updates. We're going to have 2 surveys, one of which is out right now. And I think those results, some of the early results from that were included in your pre-meeting packet as well. Alex was able to take it to the town party a couple weeks ago and get some good feedback there. And we'll also create a story map so that we can kind of establish that foundational information, keep people updated along the way, and also allow the town to keep updating the website in future phases of planning, design, and construction. With that, I think I will just leave the rest of the time for questions and input. Melissa and I are more than happy to answer anything about engagement, and I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are.
I have some questions. Go ahead, Bobby. When I was looking at the little charts that you have up here, what I didn't see was outreach to the whole community. I saw a lot of subgroups, but you speak a lot about neighboring residents. And yeah, there are going to be groups there, but the whole community is going to be using this property. So I would have liked to have seen more outreach to the general community, not just to the neighboring managers, the neighboring residents. I didn't get why it seemed to be tailored that way.
Sure. So our engagement with the broader community is really taking to gather like that really specific feedback. We're looking to circulate that pulse survey. So right now there's a survey out where they can answer questions around their vision for the site, how they might want to access the site. That's for anybody to engage with and to give us their input on. And then in the second phase, we'll have another more robust survey that really gets specific feedback on the concept designs. And then phase 3 with the broader public, we'll kind of circle back with the broader public and the neighborhood groups all in one kind of community open house, bringing everyone together in that way. And we did your note on tailored engagement for neighboring residents is completely accurate. We did want to really tailor engagement for the communities just next to the site to ensure that their vision is being met for kind of their neighborhood as well. We also know that this community may be largely Spanish speaking and not as familiar with planning processes. So we wanted to give extra time and space to have, I mean, all of the materials are translated, but those in-person engagements, we intend on having interpretation and really taking the time to make sure that the process is transparent and they can understand what that process looks like along the way. Melissa, I'll let you add anything I might have missed, and I'd love to hear if you have follow-up questions. Sorry, I can't actually pinpoint on the large screen who asked the question, but thank you for the question.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I'll just add 2 more notes. One is Laura mentioned the surveys. We're also creating a story map. So the story map is really intended to tell the story of the property. That's for everyone. So to tell the story, kind of how we got to where we are now, but then also as we're going through this process to keep updated and to have opportunity to review designs, to access our surveys that we're creating, and to know kind of when those engagement opportunities exist. So yes, absolutely, we've got targeted engagement, but also broader engagement. I'll also mention that we are also relying on the open space and trails master plan that was recently completed. This is partially because we know a lot of these communities have just like planning fatigue. And so we want to be respectful of their time, of what we're asking them, be really kind of intentional about the questions that we're asking, not, you know, getting these broad questions that they already provided input on during that master planning process. So we're relying on some of your existing resources to make sure that we're not being redundant to some of the engagement that you've already done. So hopefully that answers some of the questions, but as Laura said, happy to answer any follow-ups.
How are you getting the word out to the general public?
I might lean on Alex and Duke a little bit for this as well, but we are connecting with the town's communications staff to help us get the word out through newsletters, online, and through kind of normal channel, Facebook, kind of normal channels that the town uses to get information out.
Because I notice on your stakeholder list, you don't have general residents listed. You have neighboring managers, you have neighboring residents, but I don't see something that is the town residents in general.
Sure.
Beyond those subgroups.
Yeah, I think we could be more explicit about that.
Absolutely.
This is Kristen. I think that would be great. I think I agree with Bobby that this is the first thing that people are seeing as they're coming into town. And so while I definitely appreciate, we don't want to have survey fatigue and public engagement fatigue.
Yeah.
This is something I think a lot of people are really excited about, that do live there, but also that live in other communities in Breckenridge. So I think if we can be explicit that the general public has input into this process, that would be fabulous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That one, Chris?
Oh, sure.
Beautiful.
Just kind of curious about your group's methodology when it comes to determining the programming on the space. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of community input. And just curious, where in the process does your expertise kind of play as far as like veto power? You know, when you have a parcel like this, there's going to be a lot of interest, a lot of individual desires of what they would like to see on the parcel, but I'm curious where your group might have impact on saying, no, that's not appropriate for the space based on, you know, XYZ that you guys have found.
I guess I'm
Um,
curious, are you asking broadly to the consultant team or specifically to THK or CDR?
Yeah, just in general, I think
Okay.
this has been a multi-decade effort just from this commission
Yeah.
to acquire the space, and there's that balance of programming and access for all versus kind of on the other end of the spectrum is open space just for the sake of open space with not a lot of programming. And so I was curious where your voice comes into that balance.
I would
Go ahead, THK.
I would tell you my personal preference and direction as a designer in creating spaces for a long time in master plan communities and urban settings and the like is exactly that. We don't have to put one of everything we can think of in this space.
We sure hope not.
Skip architects, I think sometimes try to do that. Is the quality of the space by how many things we put in it. Problem with that is it quits being space. And even goes back to, Central Park and its origins. It was one thing that Olmsted had to create the park. He spent much of his career after that defending it from encroachment. Oh, it would be a great place. We need another city facility, another library, another this, another that. And so it's really important to try to defend the space and make sure that we don't turn it into something that's not. We want those spectacular views to still be there when we're done. That's I think in the design alternatives process, because we'll create at least 3 different ideas, and any of them will be great, but it's selecting the parts of each as opposed to it's that plan. And I think that'll come out in the process as well, that people will start to see preferences. Kristen, you brought up a great point that I think is very important. This is one of the first opportunities that people will see this. And that visibility from the highway, from the trails, there's a real opportunity to create a really visual and a cultural landmark of this space, not just preserve it and put it back. I mean, you've done a wonderful job along much of the river and all through the community and see a great restoration. But if we just do more of that, it won't stand out. It won't be a centerpiece. And I think it can be really a centerpiece space. And, that's our challenge, and that's what I find to be the most fun part of the design, that we're going to leave something here when we're done that really is. People will go, yeah, that's Breckenridge. And, we've arrived. We're not in Frisco. We're not in, right? We're here. What that's going to be, I don't know yet. That's the process.
I would also just like to emphasize that we find that this site is a really crucial site from accessibility standpoints. Being that it's not overtly hilly, it's not overtly mountainous. We have a lot of opportunity here to create space for people who don't usually get space created for them. And what I mean by that is, your elderly folk who maybe don't have the same mobility, or, anyone with any sort of disability. We want to try to really use this space because it is such a good space in the town. And it's one of the few opportunities left, as we mentioned earlier, that you get a full breadth panoramic of the entire valley, and you can see everything for miles. And we want to really emphasize that. We want to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, so that the entire community as a whole really sees this as a place that they can go, and all have a unique and shared experience, and that someone's not hindered by, oh, I couldn't climb up that hill, so I didn't get to see that view. We're going to make sure that everything we do here is done through the lens of accessibility, because it is such a good spot and it's such an opportune location for that. So that's part of it too, is we want to limit programs so that we're not limiting accessibility as well. But we also think there's an education component to this, teaching about the history of the site, and even just explaining, what was done to the river and why was it restored the way that it was, and how does that work, and what is the functionality of that long term, and how can we as a community, sort of support that effort, even if it's just through good stewardship and good treatment of the open space. And so a lot of what we want to do from a design standpoint is educating people so they know how they can be good stewards to the landscape. And so that, we don't have a bunch of social trails and this becomes a mess, and then it's hard to manage and organize. And so it's a lot of our focus is we want to do that so that we can educate and be accessible and provide this really amazing opportunity that can be a focal point.
I was just going to offer, I know we all appreciate a focus on access and inclusion, I would say on your stakeholder list, I saw Mountain Dreamers and I saw the FERC, the Family Intercultural Resource Center. I would suggest we have an organization called the BOEC, and they are very familiar with access and inclusion in both the summer and the winter. They might be worth talking to. Also, we have our own commission, the Social Equity Commission. They also might be worth adding onto your representatives list. And one other thought was when you highlighted, this is totally different than what we were just talking about, but highlighting the nature of the river corridor through there and how you said that's such a critical component to the design considerations. I'm wondering if you would interface with, I believe it's ERC who redid our river corridor.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure you have probably learned it had failed at one point, the previous design before ERC came. So I think understanding the nature of the way they had designed it, I'd be curious to hear from you what that looks like. Will you be talking with them, or maybe you're familiar with
Already
these?
gotten their construction plan sets, and yeah, we definitely have questions for them about how they, details of construction, because a lot of what they've done, we'll want to use the same techniques on the rest of the site. So,
Yeah,
oh, absolutely, that's very important.
We
okay.
also wanted to take an opportunity potentially to inform and educate about what was done. You know, it's sort of an interesting situation that they had to sort of intervene with that riprap sort of off channel. But it could be kind of cool to highlight that to the community and make them aware of why it was done and how it was constructed and why it works and, you know, those sorts of things. Why did it blow out in the first place? Again, I think that education is going to be a really big piece of what we try to do here. Because I think with education comes better stewardship, because you have a better understanding of what was done and why things work the way they do. So we've definitely talked with them, and we plan on coordinating with them further, because we'd like to know, we have questions about a lot of their methods, because we have no idea sort of from our current standpoint how they did some of the water retention, how they were able to get water to stay on the site. And we're going to have to borrow a lot of that, like we said earlier, throughout the site if we want to have any chance of getting some vegetation pockets and things like that throughout. So I expect a lot of coordination with them. An ERO or environmental team, they've also been in coordination with them. They've seen the same documents and they've been aware of that. And while they were out on site today, I think they took a lot of those things into consideration while they were looking at it. And so one thing I wanted to mention too is our next meeting in a couple of months, we'll have a full site assessment package for you guys. And that's comprehensive of all the work that ERO is doing currently. The reason that we aren't doing that today is because they just didn't have enough time to get out and do all of that and meaningfully assess the site. But that, coupled with our refined sort of site analysis drawings, will really be the guiding principles for the design concepts, as well as the public engagement that we receive over the course of the whole project, with neighborhood meetings and everything else too. So we're definitely going to listen to everyone. We're going to listen to the people that have been familiar with the site. We want to make sure we do a good job and that it works and it's resilient. So
I think one of the things about, what happened out there after they made the improvement, I don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily use a failure as the word, as more of just an event. Rivers are dynamic things, and they move all the time. And that's what that river did for the thousands of years before we came in and mined it and made it what we wanted it to be as humans for a while. And I think it's really just shows that, we need to make this space so it can respond to that. I think as we look at the design of the space, we may look at some of that and anticipate and accommodate that eventuality that when you get a big flood event, it's going to do that. And maybe as we move forward with the rest of the design, we can better accommodate that and anticipate that unpredictable future. Because again, I think that's just nature reminding us that rivers are very dynamic. They're not static. It's when we try to manage them as a static event that we get in problems, I think, in the long run.
Wasn't it designed to overflow
Yeah,
periodically?
I was referencing the previous design that was
Yeah, I
like an
know.
armored channel,
But
like trying to create a static system.
Yeah.
Now the system's dynamic and
Gut model
adaptive.
is really anticipating
Hmm.
the natural flow of a river and how it meanders, cut banks and in banks.
Mhm.
That's all been accommodated in the design. And so we have those plan sets, and we'll definitely, we'll have a pretty good conversation with ERC, I'm sure, here real soon,
Yeah.
just to gain their knowledge, right? Their institutional knowledge of what worked. even just in terms of the soil mixes, how they got them for how they did the channel and where it came from and all that kind of stuff.
Did Friends of Breck Trails be on here? I mean, I noticed Friends of Dillon Ranger District is on the list, but our group isn't. Our Friends of.
I
I'll
just
just
want to
mention all of those groups that you've mentioned are great additions. So we welcome any additional thoughts on groups that we may have missed as part of the list.
To your point about kind of getting the river back to how it was and how our rich mining history impacted it quite a bit. We've had a couple conversations, probably, I guess I'm looking at my email 2 years ago now, about the history of this parcel and native populations and how it was before mining. And I think we obviously nod a lot to our mining history in Breckenridge, and that's, a lot of the foundation of our history and of this town. But we have spoken with Breck History and Larissa O'Neill about native populations before miners and how we might be able to acknowledge those populations and it would be a great tie to how the river used to be before mining. And so exactly. And so as we think about, I loved some of those kind of educational signs that you had at the very beginning. Yeah, the ones on the top left, where we talk about mining, but we also talk about what it looked like before and who was here, and how stewardship of the river looked back and the whole land looked back then.
Best stewards of the landscape.
Yeah, and the miners were the worst, so.
It's
Yeah.
really great.
Right.
I've read a book recently called Braiding Sweetgrass. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've heard of that,
Oh, yeah.
but it really focused in my mind what I've been trying to get my arms and head around as a landscape architect for a long time. Mining represents the Western extractive culture,
Mhm.
right? And we still do this to this day. It's not just mining. We're a culture in America of all about taking things out, not putting anything back. And indigenous culture was always about, for everything you took, you needed to offer something back because I think we can be that way. We've actually been working for several years now and are now really intimately involved in ongoing design for Fisher State Park in Trinidad. And the indigenous community from all over the Western US has actually worked with us on that. And I've already learned some great things about, and then again, reading Braiding Sweetgrass, about just how we can tell the story of native flora and how Native Americans and how your indigenous peoples who were here long before the miners came. I think that's an important part of the history too.
Yeah, this all started because we were thinking about new names because McCain was just a person who owned the parcel at one point in time. So we started this whole process by thinking about what else we could name it as, and then we kind of put pause on it, I think, and Steph can tell you more, but about engaging the right populations to think about the naming conventions and all of that. But I think that really ties into what you guys are trying to do here, and what some of.
That would be great because history goes back long before the.
Yeah, and it's been hard to find.
Sure.
Our research has been tough.
Well, we'll take advantage of the groups we've engaged with in the past.
okay.
They'll help us to get that information. Very cool. That's great.
Is that a conversation that is still ongoing or has it been pretty put to bed? Because I'm just curious because I actually really like the idea of potentially renaming the space if there's something that suits it more.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not tied to or in love with the name per se. So it's like, that's not something that I would draw the line on at all. And we're more than willing to have a conversation about that. Especially if it's something that can be more sensitive to, the history.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't you guys just take it from here? We went through a whole process of like honoring native cultures or honoring other historical figures in our town. And then we decided we needed a more formal process. So we pushed pause.
Yeah, BSAC, the Social Equity Advisory Commission, and Breck History are working together to try to determine Native Ute populations and how they might have spent time in this valley, and perhaps through connections with the Ute tribe, come up with some naming conventions. But they're in the middle of that process, and maybe the best thing to do is to get an update from them and figure out where THK can tie in, because ultimately, I don't think anybody wants to be called McCain. It's just a matter of how we find the right name.
They went through that very same debate with Fisher's Peak, but it happened to be the name of the peak.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't the owner.
Yeah.
There's other property owners that have owned it before the state got it, but no, that can be really important.
Yep.
I think make it unique.
Those signs are pretty cool, but does our signage package apply to this as well?
You know, I think we have some flexibility in Bobby to be able to integrate some interpretive signage. You know, that wasn't a big part of the merge package with interpretive signs. So I think we have some flexibility.
I think directional signage in that will be really important for that to be consistent because
Mhm.
people learn what to look for, right? All throughout the community. And so that's an important part where that.
You're aware of that plan. You've got that plan on hand. Okay, good.
And we kind of figured that there were standards and things in place. These were really just more suggestions for content and different things that we could potentially do. And then obviously from an interpretive standpoint, like Tony's mentioning, we have a little bit more flexibility because it's more site specific.
Mhm.
And we'll use most of our interpretive signage to do a lot of that storytelling and the educational piece. So definitely. And the one I just wanted to touch on this one really quick. This bilingual informative sign. Sorry. I think that would be a really cool way to ensure that everyone who experiences the site has the ability to sort of partake in what's being shown. It's one thing to engage them in the process, another to make sure that what's built out there accommodates that. And so I think having bilingual signage of any type throughout the whole site is probably something that we should consider. And I just wanted to emphasize that because I do think that's an important piece.
Matt, what are you thinking over there?
I was gonna go. To the front country, mid country, back country question that you had and I was kind of going through, you guys probably saw some of the survey results from our open house a few weeks ago about usage on the property. The two biggest responses were walking trails and biking trails. And way back when we were
Can
talking
you
about
do your
this.
music?
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
We were talking about this a long time ago. Obviously, there's not much flat terrain at all. And the idea of, first of all, making it more accessible to more people, right, is obvious, just like you said. And certainly beginners and families and the proximity of the housing that's sort of coming online there, and then we'll eventually follow up. I think, the integration or the way that those spaces sort of flow between each other is going to be really important. And I don't have any idea how that looks, but looking at some of the photos that you had, I thought they were very beautiful ideas about how the trails integrate with each other and things like that. So it seems to me that not only, like Bobby is mentioning, who is important to hear from, I think it's also important to remember kind of and I could be off, but I think the people who will use it, I think it's going to be a destination. I think there's going to be a lot more visitors to town who, just like Kristen said, they're going to see that coming into town. And that was one of the things that was in the original open space and trails plan, was to preserve that Highway 9 corridor, which is kind of gone out the window, in my opinion. So to have that inviting sort of interpretation of our town, I think is extremely important. And I think more people there's going to be plenty of people who live adjacent to the property who use and enjoy it all the time. And I also think that there's going to be an opportunity to kind of get in touch with visitors to town that should really be taken advantage of, a lot like what you've been talking about already. So, and I think this parcel, according to our master plan, is the definition of a front country. You can drive to it, park next to it, right? So it's extremely accessible, and allowing, a lot of these there's been a lot of conversation about, I like to ride my bike. So, but it's hard, like it's really hard to ride your bike here. You got to start at 10,000 feet and go straight uphill where in any direction that you go, right? So this kind of flat parcel where there could be an opportunity for kids or beginners or young people to sort of, you know, learn to enjoy that or experience it. I think there's a great opportunity there. But I'm having a really hard time getting my head around the size of it and how much space there really is for the things that kind of, to me, make sense to use the property for, without making it seem too congested, like you suggested also. So I don't know where any of that really went, but those are kind of the things that were spinning around.
Good point about the 3 zones that we always are working through: the front, middle, and backcountry aspect. And my sense is, you know, I'd love it if there's a balance where it is front country accessible, but the work that we do on it makes it feel more backcountry. You know, obviously there's a elk population that used to kind of move through there that doesn't anymore. And I'm curious when and where we start to also manage it for the non-spoken voices that would use the space, you know, whatever mammals and the fish that are gonna, you know, populate the streams and the birds that come back. Hopefully there's some kind of a trophic cascade that occurs, you know, as we rebuild into it. And I'm curious when and where you guys might foresee us starting to manage some of that too. You know, it's not our Cucumber Gulch. It's not pristine open space, but hopefully there's some balance where some of that comes back.
No, to try to bring the ecosystem model back into the site where people can experience, they can't go out into the back country.
Right.
And I think it can become a visual landmark that when people drive by, I would hope that they look and go, oh, I want to go see that. My favorite spaces are the ones where you can, you know, grandparents take their grandkids when they come to visit them here, or vice versa. Grandkids take their grandparents and want them to go see this place, and they can access it, even though they may not want to walk more than a city block without getting tired and those kinds of things. That's the opportunity of a front country space, and I was really curious to hear what you all thought. And this is really helpful.
The elk do come through there? There were, weren't we told that there were some cameras that show them still migrating, a smaller herd, the smaller?
CPW still identifies it as part of their summer habitat. What we saw over the winter was they were crossing the river to steal hay from where the horses were stored.
Smart elk.
Maybe we can reestablish some viable pasture where they actually want to come and graze.
That's a lot of why we have ERO on our team as an environmental.
How we can do
consultant.
that.
We really want to lean on them to look at the surrounding context of the environmental sensitivity and habitat and how that reaches into the front country. And a lot of our intent here with most of our revegetation effort, while it is also to revegetate the site specifically, a lot of it's going to be tailored to bringing back those species and trying to really welcome them back. Because that is, as Craig was saying, that's really sort of what creates that interesting sort of open space setting where you have the interaction with those species, and the fact that we're in such a good setting where we can drive to it and then still, you know, see wildlife without it being intrusive to the wildlife, I think is a huge focus here. And that's why we want to do a lot of, you know, introducing pollinator species too, to even bring back our bird and bug and insect friends, you know, get them back out on the site. And that's something widespread in America that we're struggling with. We're losing massive populations of insects and things like that. So a lot of our revegetation efforts and what we do from a planting perspective and even just from a program perspective, we want to be sensitive to those habitats because we don't want it to be a situation where it's not inviting to those external forces. And like you said, I like the silent voices. I like that terminology because obviously the animals can't speak for themselves, but they're going to use the space. So you need to be accommodating to that. And we're definitely going to be thinking about that through the design process.
They're all members of the community. That's what they tell you in Brady and Sweetgrass, right? They tell you that the trees and the deer and the birds and everything, they're all members of the community just like us. What are we giving back to them? That was really the most fun about the last chapter of that book was, yeah, we live in a modern world. We're not going to go back and live like indigenous people did 1,000 years ago in America, but how can we create a new ways of giving back? And quite frankly, sites like this can be an example. And we can tell the community, and that's part of stewardship too. This is how we've given back here. You can come here and see the elk, and we've been able to somehow figure out how to create some grazable pasture out in the middle of it. That also would preserve the view spectacularly. Forest doesn't exactly preserve the view, pastures can.
But it's a real tension because we have Cucumber Gulch, which isn't on the entryway to Breck, and we still have trouble keeping people on the little paths and not overrunning the place. So this is going to be something everybody coming from 9 is going to see. So it's going to get a lot of use, I think, as we make it more of a space.
Well, one nice asset with ERO, for those who maybe didn't make the connection, is that it's Bill Mangle, who we worked with on our master plan. So he's really familiar with what we're doing. So it'll be nice to have him.
Yeah, and we'll be developing a management plan for the open space alongside the design contest. So that kind of provides a framework going forward. When the town inevitably decides to go forward with constructing whatever gets constructed out here, that management plan sets the guidelines for and the expectations for how that space gets managed. And a lot of the wildlife sensitivity and habitat considerations will be in that report. So, yeah.
Jay, what are you thinking over there? You've been working on a lot of McCain in your council capacity, so
it's the connection piece that has been our focus, is how does this area connect to the rest of the trail systems, whether it is to the east, to the south, or to the west, and I guess even to the north too, yeah. And it's very central of all those, but it's also extremely isolated, where you have to cross a highway or you have to go through wetlands or whatever it might be. And so I think from council's perspective, it's really how do we keep people from getting into their cars to drive to a trailhead that are already there, and how do we bring in that connectivity?
Very good. All the challenges of this front country condition, it is going to get a lot of, but to me, it's just so important to start. We have to quit thinking about landscape as decoration, and we have to think about it as the infrastructure of our community, just like sewer and water and everything else. And how do we make it function for us and the other members of the community, the trees and the deer and the elk and everybody else.
Anyone else?
Stepping forward, as we get into our next meetings with you as a BOZAC's commission, what should we prepare for? What do we need to bring to the table? Obviously, there's gonna be a lot of conversation between now and then, but how can we best meet this challenge of kind of programming the space?
How I try to do that is I take notes for myself when I think of something. If it's in the shower or laying in bed at 2 in the morning instead of sleeping, and bring those to us. Don't be afraid if you have an idea to, shoot us an email. I wonder if you're thinking about this. You don't have to wait till the next time we meet. If you have an idea, share it with us, and we'll try to remember it and bring it into the equation. Think about maybe examples of what you think is working well in terms of a landscape treatment or a trailhead or anything else that you think works well elsewhere in the community you already have. Maybe some that need some work so we don't do it again. What works, what doesn't work. You know that better than we do. Some of you, sounds like you ride the trails a lot and you'd like to know what works and doesn't work about that.
And
that's
a lot of
always
the
helpful.
feedback that you provided today.
Today's been
extremely
great,
helpful. I
actually.
think
Yeah.
honestly, just as a characteristic of being in this profession, we can overlook things and we do overlook things. And so we rely on you all to really help us fill those gaps. And so I appreciate the question that you had, Bobby, about the engagement. I mean, that'll help us round out everything in that way. And just questions like that, things that you noticed that we might have missed, and just making sure that it's on our radar and that we've accommodated it, because we want this to be reflective of everyone's sort of understanding and beliefs of what should be done and things like that. So.
I did, in that vein, just want to mention, this might sound like a very simple consideration, but it's a very critical consideration, is that this landscape is winter half the time. And I think we realized when we were working on our master plan, we would easily lose sight over and over again that we weren't just talking about the summer. And so it's so important to think about what the landscape looks like, how the functionality changes, how the public engagement changes, the use changes. Even, for example, like the photos you show, they're all of summer. So, and we had that same pitfall exactly where our master plan was almost littered with exclusively photos from the summer. So we've learned that lesson over and over again. So just something to keep in mind.
Winter's a lot longer.
Being a former Michigander, I can appreciate that as well. Yeah.
I believe Laura had
That's winter,
hand
but-
raised.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate from a process standpoint, a lot will happen between this meeting and the next time we meet with you all. So more about site assessment, concept design, and community input. So we'll make sure that your pre-meeting packet, it prepares you to help us and get the most meaningful input as well. So just wanted to flag that for you all.
Chris, I'd add, for all the BOSAC commissioners, when you're having a conversation about McCain, definitely encourage people to take that survey that's on our website and on Facebook and stuff, and you guys take it yourself. But just a resource, if you happen to be chit-chatting about it, just reiterate, hey, there is a survey with options and open-ended feedback. So just want as many responses as possible on that.
Great point.
And I'm sorry, did you say that you did have an opportunity to review our signage plan that we just approved, just for an idea of kind of where we're heading?
I don't think we've seen the full signage plan, but I know that we've reviewed the terms that were laid out in the master plan, but I'm certainly willing, and Craig and
We're
I
gonna get
will
it.
certainly take a look at the package.
I think it's worthwhile just
Oh, yeah.
their eyes and, just to have an understanding of, a bunch of work we've done.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We want to build upon it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
It's brand new, so.
Takes a lot of work.
It'll be
They're
fun to
big
see how you take that and use it.
Alex, sorry. Where on the website is the survey link?
I don't know that it's on the website yet.
Oh.
We just made a Facebook post the other day, so we'll get a blog post on the front page of the website.
That would be awesome. Yeah, thanks.
We are working with the outreach team on that, like there'll be a Summit Daily article and they're kind of helping us make sure we broaden the survey messaging.
Great. Anything else? Thank you so much for
We're
coming.
So excited.
I like these meetings where there's no vote at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
We wait till it's gone and then we do voting.
Question, we brought physical copies on board just in case our digital copies didn't work, but we're more than happy to leave these physical copies. Yeah, so, I'll step out, they're on. But I will leave them for you guys to.
Thank you.
Said you're going to bring snacks,
Give us a
or
second.
dessert.
You didn't get to do it.
I know.
Sam, we'll get your drive out too.
Okay, yeah, no.
Thanks, Laura and Melissa, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for accommodating us virtually. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the opportunity. Looking forward to keep meeting with you all.
Yeah.
Us too.
Okay, so now we're on to our open space, our open house review.
Yeah, just wanted to take an opportunity to revisit that, learn from it, get any feedback. So I put 3 questions in the memo, but yeah, just would love just open discussion. Felt like it was an improvement on some of the turnout we've gotten in previous years, but we want to keep building this thing and build the engagement, and would love to hear your feedback on what went well, what we could do differently, and maybe feedback that you might have heard individually that you want to share with the group. And finally, just we included the survey from the open house, and then we've since supplemented that with survey questions through our Facebook page and just shared those results. So just open it up for any input you might have.
Do you guys feel like the notice was put out broadly enough? to people? I mean, I think it was better. I do. I mean, I always feel like there can be and should be more people there. And I mean, poking around pretty regularly and I feel like I saw some mention of it, but I had to go looking for it when I wanted to remind myself what the day was. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think it was like so much better. I also think with you guys, especially Alex, doing so much to improve the website and to improve social media, I think we can continue to build on that. I know at least 4 or 5 people were there because I independently posted about it. And it would be great if we could do something more consistently, like on Facebook and Instagram, that's more like every single day leading up to it or something, so that people really remember it. Because when it's a story, you're like, where did I see that? And like, you're not gonna remember where you saw that, and then you can't go find it again. So I think it was a huge improvement. And I think now that we're making the website and our social media more of a go-to place, hopefully that gains traction this year, where people are, I think the trail, the wetness, what are we calling it? Conditions. The trail conditions, I think if we can continue to make our website the hub for where people look for this sort of information, then like I just got back from Crested Butte and everybody knows to go to the Crested Butte Mountain Biking Association for their trail conditions. Like it's just part of their DNA. So if we can get that for our trails thing, I think that we'll have like better messengers and better followers so that this can get out. And I don't know if there's anything more in terms of outreach other than more consistency that we can really improve on, other than continuing to build a population of people locally who know exactly where to go to every time they have a question or know they saw a communication somewhere. So if we can continue to drive traffic to our site, then that's good.
I did have one idea on that, which would be sort of reverse engineering, Alex, what you're doing on Facebook, which I didn't know about. I'm sorry, but Duke told me about it. So I logged in and I saw all your posts. And I thought if you did that before the meeting, like we're talking about slalom, we're talking about McCain, then people might be more incentivized to attend if any one of the varied issues is compelling to them. So that's just one way perhaps we try approaching the marketing.
And what's the Facebook page name?
EOB Open Space. And I will say we have been doing a lot better with that stuff. I think in general, we're just our statistics, you can see that statistics on the back end of these social media sites, and we're getting more and more views, more and more engagement. But that's a great idea to kind of preview that. The idea with what we're doing now is for folks that missed it to still have a chance to comment. But I think you're right that, yeah, if there's something that really excites you and you see that in the weeks leading up, you're going to show up and attend the meeting and learn everything that's there.
Yeah.
And I've been really pushing that, the Be Like Breck app that connects, and everybody I've showed it to is really thrilled that here's
Cool.
the place they can go to look for a specific trail, to find out what the latest is about it, what the rating is, how hard it is. I mean, it's just a lot of great information. And I mean, I've even talked to tourists on the street who look befuddled. I mean, and everybody is very happy to have that particular access point for us. And I was wondering if maybe reaching out to some groups like what used to be called the Senior Center, which is now the Summit 50 Plus or something like that. There's a bunch of hiking groups there. And maybe an outreach to them to get some of them interested, especially the ones that live here in Breck, to be aware of these meetings, these kinds of events that we have.
2 thoughts. One, it was great attendance. I think that's one of the better ones that we had, and definitely everybody seemed pretty engaged. Watching you guys looking to communicate around the QR code and stuff like that. I don't know if we could set up the programming a little differently, maybe some smaller groups where you might, have that same conversation with, 4 or 5 different smaller groups, and we kind of move them through. Because I know that was a challenge for a lot of people that were there. And then there was a lot of QR codes, which is great, but we had a bit of a crux trying to find the QR code for the surveying was some of the feedback I got. And then putting on my sales and marketing lens, if we want to juice this, and I've seen it time and time again, if we had I don't know what, rules are around raffles or giveaways, stuff like that, but we could absolutely juice this thing because there's no easier way to get people to turn out than to give stuff away. And that's not a hard ask within the outdoor industry or the bike industry or anything that we're associated with. Just let them know that we're having our annual open house and, 2 or 3 giveaways changes the dynamic. And I guess we just need to determine what's the goal set with this. Are we looking for maximum attendance and voice? Or just to kind of keep going along the way we are, because we've been about the same for a long time now, but yeah, this one was pretty good. So let me know. I'll call on the dogs. We'll have 150 people there knocking down the doors for the raffle.
You use the babysitting?
No. And I think it was great to offer it, but at the same time, I felt like, sometimes it's actually nice seeing families out there and families involved, and it's a cool educational moment to have some kids that are, somewhat processing it. So I think we'll continue to offer that, but at the same time, I don't want to say like it's a no kid event either.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That would be a reason why some parents wouldn't be able to
Mhm.
come if
Yeah.
they didn't really want to have to deal with kids while trying to figure out what was going on the boards and things.
Yeah.
So if you had babysitting and food and raffles, the whole town ought to come.
Somebody call the Riverwalk.
Honey.
When I looked over to the pizza buffet and it was all kids.
80 boxes of pizza.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna attempt to speak on behalf of David without his permission, but he had a thought, actually shared it with Chris as well, that Alex, your effort to collect all that information with the survey, and Tony, that was so great. And if anything, it was just bothersome to me to watch people not engaging in that as much as we wanted them to. And I think David's thought was just making it more of like a deliberate presentation where maybe we ask people to like sit down, like come participate. This is part of what we're doing
Yeah.
versus just sort of quasi being involved
I think we
because
lost a little momentum too from presenting.
Yeah.
to, hey, switch over to this survey, and there was like
Yeah.
a minute or so of like shuffling, and then the crowd just kind of was like, they're not set up yet. So
But I think what you did was wonderful and it was such crucial information to try to collect. So perhaps just like
different approach.
they're like on our turf here. They need to sit down, participate because they're getting a free pair of socks. So no, but it was great. And obviously I just want to say like the effort put forth by staff was very clear. So thank you so much. It was like a lot of work and we saw that. So thought it was great.
Nikki, on that note, I can't remember, somebody suggested a PA system, which hopefully our crowds grow but I think it even would have been helpful that time. So we'll have some sort of microphone system there next time.
Yeah. One other quick thought, Bobby, with what you mentioned about these groups. Like, I wonder if we've ever done it where we invited groups like a hiking group or any of the mountain bike groups to come set up like a table or something for a place to gather information. I don't know if that's complicating it more than we want or it's out of our purview, but that could potentially just add an interesting dynamic to it.
And also I know that at the senior center, they also have event days where groups come in. And that could be something that maybe we attend to connect with those hiking groups. Friends of Breck Trails, for instance, could have a table and talk about opportunities to do some trail work or weed pull or whatever. But that would get them thinking about what we're doing here.
Anything else on that? What was staff's thoughts on how it went? Mark wasn't there. We missed you, Mark.
Sorry.
You've been to one of those before.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, I think overall we were really happy. I think the efforts that we made to try to diversify the outreach, try to gather feedback, all those things worked well, but I think there's always room for improvement. So it's nice to hear what you guys are saying. It kind of reinforces what we were thinking as well. But I think we're, moving forward in a good direction. But I think always room for improvement to increase that engagement.
I think just more advertising, not just the day before or the day of in the little calendar in the daily online, but
One unfortunate detail that I hadn't thought of, I heard from probably 10 people that they were gonna come and the traffic was so bad northbound, because that was when the roundabout
Oh,
was
yeah,
closed, and they were
yeah,
like,
that was a
forget it.
mess.
So that's just unlucky, but at least they had good intentions.
Actually had her hand up.
I hope it's okay for me to speak at this moment. Alex and Duke, I'm
Yeah.
gonna pass along a resource that we actually use in the transportation sector about public involvement techniques. Appendix B has just like such good information on like budgetary restrictions, if you're looking to be equitable, and kind of helps you frame your engagement around some of the goals. So those are specific techniques like design charrettes versus polling versus games and contests. And so it might just be useful to poke through, and happy to talk with you about that anytime.
Thanks, Laura. Happy to have the advice.
Great. Yeah, and I think like the follow-up, all the follow-up Facebook stuff is like, when people are sitting in their living rooms, they get a lot more. Right, like, that's what we're hoping when they're sitting there, but it doesn't always happen, but I think those follow-ups are great and like an opportunity to continue to build on the momentum in hopes that we can, maybe use that for other messaging, like, please come to our meetings. Which would be awesome. Thank you. It's like that. And maybe by the time we get a year from now and it's the next open house,
Yeah.
we have more people on the hook, which would be great.
Yeah, I think the post after the fact showed that there's definitely a lot of interest. The
Yeah.
Aspen Alley one, there was like 60 comments, people back and forth, mostly cordial, but
Mostly cordial.
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you ever ask what you don't like about the trail system? I mean, just let them say what they see are the negatives that need to be improved.
Yeah, I think the closest we get is something like, love to hear any of your comments, but we could more explicitly say, please tell us some things you don't like. We probably get good response levels.
You might get an
Yeah.
scoring.
Yeah.
But it also might be able to help you target where
Yeah.
specific places need specific work that the people who are using those trails, and it may be some that you don't use and you don't see as much.
No, it could be, thank you.
It could be eye-opening.
Into the actual survey data, I did think it was interesting to see so much spoken to about downhill mountain bike trails. Perhaps they crowdsourced. I think they were very clever, like they came out of the woodwork to participate in our survey. But it is interesting. It's a user group that I don't think we think of distinctly as a user group, or I don't necessarily. So that was a nice reflection for me, just to know they're out there and they care. And there's a lot of feedback in here about downhill. Is that,
Yeah, we had the same observation.
yeah.
And sure, maybe they were active in telling their friends to do it, but I think on the one hand, sometimes we think, well, it's the same people that come to our open houses telling us the same things, and we got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Well, we can't listen to that group and then dismiss the downhill mountain biking contingent for, it's got to be consistent. So
Yeah.
it was good to see that engagement and recognize that that is part, a user group in our community.
Yeah. And when we think about envisioning new trails, it's like, I don't think we've distinctly said, let's make a downhill trail necessary. I haven't heard that a lot anyway, but like Aftermath or something. Hopefully not quite like that. Are we good on this one? Okay. Let me go back here.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Okay. So signage work plan, the pilot program.
Yeah, so here we are with Merge again. We've taken a little break, but we're back in action. Recently, they submitted a sign location map for the pilot program at Illinois Gulch. If you had a time to look at it, it's pretty robust. Staff has been working with them and had a few edits and revisions. We're working on that, but just kind of want to, first of all, direct questions to that sign location map in Illinois Gulch area. And if you guys had any questions regarding those sign types or locations, concerns for that.
Like SL too. I mean, but it can't be overlooked. Like, that's a perfect indication of how our trail system actually exists.
Mhm.
There's just intersections everywhere.
Yeah. And I, want to also recognize, the locations on Highway 9, locations on Baldy Road, sign locations and the parking lot. And, this is something new to our program where we're normally in the woods putting up a post. So, it's coordinating and working through this, but, also working with the streets department, recognizing these signs do and are needed. There's a lot of, comments from the public of people getting lost, getting to the troll, whether they're walking or driving on Highway 9.
Or
So
Getting to the trailhead, he
Get-
means.
just getting to the trailhead. Yes. And continue to walk up to the sidewalk to, the sawmill. But does anybody have any, major concerns or comments? I think staff is really dealing with the minute details of the locations and the information. And we feel pretty comfortable with what Merge is presenting now and given us after a few revisions. And it's also going to be something, a work in progress, I think, as we go through this and actually get them up in the field. And does this sign work for this particular location? Or it actually might need a D2 here or a S1, and try to refine that as well. But we, like said, I think we feel pretty comfortable with what has Merge as presented. And we'd like to kind of move forward with that full blown out plan of signage and see how that works.
what is A, B, C, and D? The red A, B, C, and D on this?
Those are the sides of the post.
All that is?
Yeah.
What are the financial implications of this pilot of, because it's heavy on signage, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of going above and beyond what we've approved for the I guess the consultant and user Merge. What does this piece add as far as expense?
That's a good question, Jay. So we're gonna next step is we're gonna look at some sign types and sign materials. And then once we do that, Merge will be able to provide a complete cost for that. And so we've got 3 different types of sign samples that we'll work through, but it will be costly. The signs are expensive.
Do we know what each of the sample signs would cost?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I've got them kind of written down on the back, and we kind of talk about some of the pros and cons of each materials and
It's be a Nikki test. We guess what the price is.
trivia question.
It's like, what? Oh, yeah, you bet.
Somebody did that to us earlier in our staff meeting.
Yeah.
Alex and I did not guess high enough.
One thought really quick was including the etiquette signs, just because if you're getting public feedback, they'll probably say there's no etiquette signs, or maybe they're already there by virtue of existing. I'm not sure.
Is that rules and regulatory? Would that be
That's
under
separate.
ed?
That's a separate category.
And Nikki, are you referring to different etiquette signs other than your etiquette signs?
No, just the ones we currently have,
Yep.
but it's just so people don't, I assume you'd get some public feedback that those were missing, unless, like I said, they're just there already and you don't need to add anything to it. Anything else on that?
I'm excited to see them out in the wild and to
Yeah.
get some feedback. And we're gonna start, we have to start somewhere, right? And this, if this is what the experts are telling us to start with, then I look forward to seeing that and can't wait to, this fall, see, kind of get some feedback on it and be able to tailor it and be able to extrapolate to what that means, what that feedback means for us of going, okay, we need to par back 30% from what is recommended for our community. And then what does that mean? And how do we roll that out? And how many signs per year can we afford to do? And do we want to do? And what are the priorities areas? So there's just so many doors that open once this part is completed. So it's exciting.
And it's a really busy area to do your pilot on.
Yeah.
You understanding the reality of the actual installation for staff will be really helpful.
It's like learning a new program of sign types and numbers and letters.
I mean, just looking at this, I'm like, I can't wait to see it in person because this is not how I think.
I don't know if anybody looked at that. Yeah. You can just get so granular. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. So like Jay, I'm really looking forward to seeing it in the wild.
Yeah.
Then I'll have lots of fun, I'm sure.
And did you bring some for us to see?
Yeah, so if we're good with the sign location map, we'll just kind of go do a little show and tell on some sign types. Yeah, it's, okay, you can, I'll pass them down and then you guys can look at them. So I'll pass that down, Matt, if you want to look at it. This is it's a color. So the whole background's a color, and then it's a vinyl sticker. Pretty durable, somewhat effective, not great with small print. You know, if you were looking at some of our kiosk signs that would have like these smaller lines and small print, not the best just because it's a vinyl sticker and have the potential to peel off and chip. But that option does say the arrow was peeling off. We could order stickers and actually put vinyl stickers on them. So there is easier replacement on that.
Is there any like UV protective coating?
We can look into that. There are some coatings, protective coatings that we could put on them. Yes.
Be good.
Yes. So
Is this font all predetermined?
yes, yep, fonts. And so we have a whole manual of sign sizes, font sizes, dimensions within that we would then take to a sign shop for them to make.
I think that particular sign is a strange illustration of not the best font. It looks like a Illinois. It's LLL
The same. as-
Illinois.
Right.
That's a good point.
So just to give you a cost, what's it say on the back of that, Alex?
Free is 510.
$110 will get you one of these signs, one of these signs, and a regulatory sign for $510. The next option,
That's just on the test case, or is that our bulk order?
no, that would be the bulk order per sign. So this next is a powder coated aluminum. It's colored with then direct paint on it. It's the most durable and thicker. But as you can see, within the week of so at our office, it's easily chipped.
Yeah.
And I love our trail crew. They do a great job, but gentle and sensitive are not in their wheelhouse. And I was really surprised to see that. It's long lasting as long as it's not getting chipped.
Don't touch it.
Pretty expensive. For the set of 3, it was 600,
620.
620.
Is this all through Merge or?
So this is through a sign shop in Denver. They call it Arapahoe. I also reached out to the sign shop in Frisco, and their prices are very similar, maybe even a little cheaper. That we could go local and have a little faster turnaround and also be local. The next, the third one is a dye bond. It's a combination. It's of a laminate over the top of aluminum. These we've used for Nikki's etiquette signs, very similar, most cost effective. And it's basically, the front of it is basically a vinyl sticker. So if that did fade or start to peel, you could actually order a sticker and put it over the top, maybe 1 or 2 times compared to replacing the whole sign. We've seen really good life out of those etiquette signs of durability, strength. You also could have the option of making those thicker for even increased durability. If there was a lot of overlapping on the sides, we could make that thicker. So some signs that would have a full background we could fully mat to could be maybe that diameter. And then somewhere we have these regulatory signs where they're a little wider and they're only mounted on one post. We could actually make them a little thicker for strength. And those come in at 360 for a set of 3. So they're the most reasonably priced. They do have the quickest turnaround as well. Coming from a sign shop, they're easier to manufacture and quicker turnaround. So after kind of discussing with staff, we felt the Dibon was the best bang for your buck for durability, cost. We've seen it out in the field. It's lasted a while.
One advantage with Dibond is it's lighter.
Mhm.
I don't know if that matters from an installation standpoint,
Yeah.
but it is just a lighter material.
And so I could pass these other ones around for you to look at. This would be, similar. One thing that Merge did miss on this is are here dots. So we'll make sure to have those in the future. We will also have the ability to manipulate the size and the scale of these maps, and also the user facing map.
Heads up orientation.
Heads up orientation. Yes.
Wouldn't that Dibon also have like the sustainability play for us as well, since you basically just re-stickering
Yeah,
the existing metal, you're not.
Yes. Yep. So a little easier to fix.
easier maintenance too. You don't have to replace the sign.
Right.
So
Yeah.
For lettering on the top of this one, the I and the LL are clear.
Actually, can
Yeah, instead of the single line that's
Make it
on
half
those.
Not sure what font type that is at.
I love that picture.
They may have given us 2 or 3 fonts to use that are all really similar looking.
Uh-huh.
I could be wrong about that, but I'll review the plan again. I think there might be 2 types of fonts. that
I
they
would go with whichever one has.
I like that one
distinctive
better.
Letters.
Yeah, the one that has the.
Okay.
I'm talking about, that's the way it should be, but on those other signs, that's not the way it was.
How did you pronounce it, Bobby?
Or, oh, no.
Yeah, so the next question is, what do you guys think the Dibond is the way to go, or would you like to do the painted aluminum or the powder coated
Dibond.
Hmm,
section off? Okay.
that's good.
Middle one's got not to be that,
Mm-hmm.
got that scratched up that easily.
And the first one had the raised letters, so like you could see those peeling off.
Yeah.
So go with staff's
The
recommendation.
the cheapest, most. Not done yet.
No,
I
no.
don't want to get antsy. Okay, this is looking exciting.
We need the Dibond.
Looked, we went back and forth on
Yeah.
that map. This is Duke's.
Well,
Well,
one thing
best.
Merge says, it gets a little crowded.
Yeah.
But also just that like, I think maybe Dave Rossi was part of it. We talked about this at one point in an earlier meeting and felt like more important is the overall gain and loss versus like, you're always around 10,000 feet or whatever. And if Merge's advice was, you kind of got to pick one. Either you can have the total gain and loss, or you can have the above sea level elevation.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Why do we have the no e-bikes and no cars on this sign? Wouldn't we also be having one of those signs at one of these? So if we're trying to reduce clutter, we might want to do one or the other, unless this is going to be in
Yeah.
a place where that's not.
I think, Kristen, I can answer that. The idea would be that sign is catching people like at a trailhead,
Yeah.
and that restriction applies to all the trails on there. And then this sign, and maybe this isn't exactly how it would be at Illinois Creek, but it's just showing the example. So in a place where like Little Mountain would only have a no hiking pictogram, because you already know that cars aren't allowed there. So like if there's a use restriction that's different within a network, then it would have it. Otherwise, all the entry points should should alert you to that.
Gotcha. That's a
have a
lot
note.
of coordination.
Sorry, no biking.
Biking on.
We're, sorry, Bobby.
Curious to see how.
Eradicate hiking.
Well, I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, right.
Mhm. So if you guys are in agreement, we'll move forward with the dye bond material. Jay, to answer your questions, we'll communicate that to Merge, and then they will include that in their price package. So in July, we can update you in our staff summary what that costs of the pilot program would, and then we'll also let Catherine know. Moving forward.
Kristen, I'm remembering another part of that restriction thing was, and Nikki made the point originally, but it's just a lot more succinct to indicate what's not allowed versus what's allowed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe we decide we want to have what's restricted everywhere, but at the same time, you can't. Doesn't say no drones or, you know, I mean, you could get
Horses.
creative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we gonna have a you are here?
Yes, that was one of the things Merge left out on these samples, and so they're going back and integrating those UR here's into that. Yep.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
Have you arrived at what the QR code will send people to?
So I think they'll be sending them to our town of Breck
Trail
map. Yep.
That one wants off
Oh,
Oh,
where'd it go?
to leave no trace.
Hmm.
Also good, but
yes.
Yeah, we want it to be a wayfinding tool, I think, and a translation tool.
Where the QR code would land you.
Oh, yeah.
Because that one indicated a leave no trace. But it might have been just for an example,
Yeah.
not necessarily final.
Doing there. I don't know that goal to have all these linked to the Leave a Trace website.
Yes.
Just an example of how a QR code would work.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions on the Merge?
Good job.
All right.
Early as August, okay.
What'd you say?
When?
I think I'm just
likely?
talking out loud. Thinking out loud.
You're just mentioning the
Rereading
timing.
Memo.
Yeah.
That they're gonna be done by August, hopefully.
Okay.
Do we see nodding? Is that yes? It's gonna be.
Yeah,
done by-
I think we'll be in the works. Definitely, we'll be working with Merge, lining up the sign contractor. I feel working with the sign shop in Frisco would be our best bet. Very comparable prices, that they were responsive in getting quotes, and we've worked with them in the past, so.
Could we maybe do a site visit? That could be a good
Yeah.
site visit for BOSAC.
Yeah, so if it goes
Jumping ahead.
efficiently, we could start having these in late August or September or something, so maybe we do a site visit at September, October BOSAC meeting, November BOSAC. It's a tight timeline, you know, we need to get the final order from Merge and then get the sign shop to turn it around and then start putting them in, but we're trying to take
you-
advantage of as long, you know.
Yeah. If it works out.
Yeah.
Are you replacing posts too?
So I think, yes, some will be replacing and some will be existing. Yep, a little combination.
Okay, good there.
Those signs resistant to like graffiti?
Do they make those? Yeah.
So what do you do when those signs get spray painted?
Ibon, it's a sticker and we just peel it off and put a new sticker on the top.
Point for dye bond.
You have Nikki's missing. I'm like, where are those?
Oh.
Whose wall are these?
Oh, okay, we're good on science? We're good? Okay. Future BOSAC field trip. You want to talk about that, Duke?
Sure. Did we do it? Yeah, this is something Nikki and I have been talking about and just went through and dug up where we've been in the past and wanted to see if that was something that this BOSAC would be interested in doing and what you would be open to ideas, but also just like what you would want, what would be some goals out of a field trip, and then what time of year would we be looking to do, and just kind of start brainstorming now and give us some direction, and we'll do some homework and see what's possible.
Ooh.
Go, Chris.
Just 'cause I drive
Norway.
through there pretty frequently, though, I don't know if they're ready for touring yet, but just what they're doing with the, Clear Creek Canyon pathway is amazing. You know, they're literally moving mountains to put this path in. So it's the Peaks to Plains Trail Program, I think was Polis's initiative. Was it Polis that did that
I think so.
initially? Or, Hick and Looper, yeah. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. And then they're tying it, obviously it's a bike path, but how it ties into all the natural paths and the biking and hiking trails that it connects to is next level.
Where is that?
Clear Creek Canyon,
Okay, and where is Clear Creek?
Creek Canyon, between Golden
Oh, off
and
to the left on 7.
Idaho Springs.
Oh my God.
So, yeah,
Oh, that would be sweet.
Jeff Coe.
We had talked a little bit as staff just about, and maybe one of the bigger programs might be something to look at, like down at Jeffco or even Boulder or something like that. Just because they've taken on so many of these issues that we haven't yet, or, directional stuff like that. So.
Yeah, Mayhem Gulch runs every other day, hiking and biking. So they have that implemented on a couple trails.
Are there other places people thought of that come to mind? Matt, did you have? I thought you did.
I don't know. I mean, I just remember going to Steamboat and how incredible that was to like, but that was a more sort of similar program, maybe slightly even smaller than us. And it was, I just thought it was great to exchange the ideas with people. So, but I like Mark's idea. Like, I think we're heading more towards trailhead amenities or alternate day use and things like that. Certainly, kind of understanding how those decisions come about would be great to understand.
It seems like whenever we come back, we're always like thankful we're here.
Yeah, Aspen was great, but we're glad we're not Aspen.
We're glad we're not them,
Pitkin
but
County.
there's certainly things to be learned from all of those programs, that are a little more mature than ours. So it's one thought.
Or, yeah, I don't know, maybe they can come to us, they're like less mature ones, but I know like with BV and Salida growing so much, their open space and trails program is growing a lot too. So as they're in the thick of thinking about these things in real time, it could be a good collaboration opportunity.
Are people interested in doing this? I mean, I think it would not be a regular meeting date. It would be extra. Okay. Do we get to go in the van?
Yeah, another day in the little bus.
Where we build rapport.
The orange slices. I definitely think we should do it. I
Okay.
got a lot out of the Aspen one.
I believe we went to Aspen. Duke, we thought September, was it? Or October? Do we
Yeah, I
remember?
think it was in the fall.
In the fall? How's the fall sound, assuming that gives staff enough time to plan something?
All is delight.
Okay.
And I think yours is a really good suggestion because it's not so far away.
Right, and extended season if we do go later into the fall.
Yeah, not too far.
No, you're right, for sure.
That's an overnight trip.
Thought of that. I think that sounds fun. Okay. Well, I think is that enough information?
Yeah, I mean, we can come back with a few ideas.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So Jay, it's your time to shine. Other matters related to open space.
We didn't really have much that concerned open space at our last meeting. It was pretty heavy on runway and housing, and so I don't know if anything really touched open space on that meeting. So, yeah.
I misspoke. I meant to do council matters, but yeah. Yes, thank you. I said other matters, which is actually our blanket, J matters related to open space, yes. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah.
So now properly open matters. Does anybody have any? Thing to say? I had one, I was curious how the trail reporting functioning is working and if folks are using it.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, they're using it and it's working pretty well. There's been if like, it's not a perfect science by any means. And we've been getting reports from people we trust and if trust them a lot and if there's photos included, we'll update it based on that report. So yeah, there's a bit of public informing that map, but it's mostly, I think, staff getting out there in the field, the trail techs telling us what's out there. But as far as like the trail, if there's a problem on the trail, that's been working great. I think we're getting multiple messages a day. It's kind of slowing down a little bit as things are, being maintained, but I think it's probably been the biggest success of the new website, to be honest, is just more and more people knowing about it and the GPS location, the photos, it's been huge. I can't speak for Joel and the crew, but it seems like they're loving it. And we've now got a system in place where we can address this map. The map shows all the reports. And then once we've addressed it, we turn it off and it logs that all of those reports. So at the end of the year, we can see, all the ground that we've covered. I think it's been awesome, but I'll let Duke and Tony speak on it as well.
Yeah, it's been, a lot of people have been using it and, Nikki, I know you made a report from Upper Nightmare the other day and it is limited by cell service and I guess that's obvious, but I've noticed too, like sometimes I'll go to make a report and trying to attach a picture to it and I can't submit it. But then if I don't attach a picture, maybe I can, or maybe I can't at all. And later you have to, because one of the big benefits is pinpointing the location. Like I was on Rock Island and there's a tree down and I couldn't submit anything and I could go back later and guess the location, but it's not that helpful when someone says there's a tree down halfway up ZL. It's like, well, that's hours of searching. Anyway, but it has been really popular and it's been super helpful for our crew and getting out there and jumping on stuff as soon as we hear about it. It's been great.
We've been trying to encourage people to do the muddy meter, like not just down trees. And I know I just talked on that, but that's been a recent effort in the past few weeks. It's just like with our social media posts encouraging, hey, it's not just for drainage issues, but it's also for you to give open-ended feedback on your trail's yellow on your map, but I think it's actually red. And so we've been getting a bit more of that in the past week or so too. So that's been helpful.
Yeah.
We do plan to lift the trail wetness feature when could be Little Flume and Great Flume, Little French and Great Flume, excuse me, because that's kind of like the furthest afield trails that we maintain. So once those are dry, we'll probably just lift that and not try to keep track of things like Wheeler or just stuff that's kind of beyond our scope and maybe takes a while to dry up.
Cool.
I'm just really excited that this website is working so well. I love having a place that you can go to, like a one-stop shop to direct people when they have questions. It's just really exciting. You guys did a great job. I also have an anecdote. I think I told some of you, but I got feedback from a friend that was so excited to go ride Ellie's Features because they thought it was going to be a downhill mountain bike trail with features. So
We got him.
he was like, what the heck? Anyway, so I was like, oh yeah, I guess it was a little too much of an inside joke for our group. And the public is like, I'm misled. But they still said it was fun.
I did write a blog post about Ellie's
You did?
features.
That was
So you could direct them to our blogs.
I'm like, you didn't read Nikki's blog last year?
I did. One other thing I wanted to mention at the open house, I wrote a whole thing I wanted to read and then Duke like very casually and cavalierly spoke eloquently. And so then I forgoed my sheet, which I was trying to be like Duke. And I didn't get to say what I wanted to say because I completely forgot. But I'd be remiss to say I did talk about how we're so thankful for staff. I calculated the amount of years of staff experience at the open house, which was 72 years of accumulated experience. That doesn't even count Mark. What would that be, Mark? Add Add a couple more decades of experience. So, I mean, that's like so impressive. I wish I would have said that. And then I also wish I would have remarked on like what a great iteration of BOSAC we have right now. I forgot to say that too. So I'll just say it to you guys. I'm so appreciative. So that's all. I wanted to mention that. Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Any other, are we good?
One last thing, Greg did have a message. Adding enforcement in Cucumber Gulch to the next meeting.
Okay, thanks for the suggestion. I think that would be a potentially staff determination, Greg, on if that's within our purview, but we can certainly follow up. Okay. All right, I'm allowed to move to adjourn the meeting.
A second?
Great.
We're done.
We did it.
No exec session tonight.
No executive.